Over the years, Richard McLellan, attorney at law, expanded into McLellan, Schleybaugh, and Whitbeck. And as you said, for yourself, you developed this kind of niche that you were going to be the expert in campaign finance law, the lobby law. You really, I think, you were one of the first lawyers, I think, in Michigan to look at this and say, this has now become a regulated industry, and just like lawyers can practice utility law, I can practice political law.
That's right. It is a regulated industry. It has all the elements of a regulated industry: complexity, heavy regulation, barriers to entry, criminal penalties to frighten people out of the system, just like we do when we license doctors or other people. We use the government to limit access. And so political activity is now not democracy in the way that some people would have you believe, but it is a regulated industry as much by the government regulation as it is by the increase in money. Now, it's also true there's enough money in it now that a few lawyers, and you know them all here in Lansing, make a living, pretty good living on ballot campaigns and elections and so on. But it is what it is, both nationally and in Michigan. It's a very complicated and specialized area of practice and specialized area of activity. You just don't have volunteers in campaigns anymore.
Also, Michigan, at least in the late 70s, moved to amend the Michigan lobby law, and you developed an expertise in that. I remember a famous chart that I think you produced on that. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the Lobby Act, again, it's a very complicated statute in what it defines as lobbying. Every word is defined. So lobbying is attempting to influence administrative or executive action, and so the executive action, administrative action, or legislate, all of it is defined. So anybody facing that law has to know all those definitions. Well, your average lobbyist, or frankly average lawyer, looks at that and it's very intimidating. So it was my business to hustle clients. So I had to speak at the Michigan Chamber, I think, and I took all those definitions and created about a 4-foot-long chart showing how this definition was hooked to this one. And I said, and I held it up and I said, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to understand to be in compliance with the law. It reminded me as an early version of the chart they made of Hillary Care, showing how complicated that system is, or if one could be developed a chart on Obamacare, which probably is not capable of being drafted. But it worked because I actually used it. And I knew I created it, and then it was in my head. And so I was able to do analysis and help people go through this maze of regulation, what you can do, what you can't do, and what you have to count, what you have to turn in. And it was part of the basis of building a real expertise in lobby regulation, as well as what I had already pretty much developed on campaign finance.
I recall we retained you, meaning not only the chamber, but the First Amendment Committee to Protect the Right to Lobby.
Right.
And you were one of 3 lawyers that we'd hired to challenge the constitutionality of that act in a case called Part6 versus Austin. Do you recall that case at all?
I do, and I always remember that Francis Part6 was head of the Library Association, and I thought it was a brilliant decision that I think Jerry Coombs and some other people made. We have to have this committee. We have to challenge the Lobby Act, and we can't have the president of the Michigan Chamber be chairman of this group. Who could we get? What lobby group is the least threatening to people? And they said, well, what about Fran Platz, a wonderful woman who ran the Library Association, and she was a lobbyist for money for libraries. And she took it on with abandon. Plus, it was sort of a free speech issue. You know, should people be regulating in their political speech? And being a librarian, She had those instincts. So she was our front person, if you will. I remember they had some big time law firms that were driving the choice, and I think they misspelled my name on the brief, but which frequently happened. And I learned later on, try to control the brief, and so at least they get your name right. And but those kinds of issues were reflected the fact that there's 3 or 4 law firms that take on these kinds of issues. Sometimes they split between Republican and Democrats. Sometimes they all work together. But there's this very small fraternity of people that do this. And one of the people was Gary Gordon with the Attorney General, who was with the Attorney General for 30 years. And he eventually went into private practice and joined my then firm before I retired. And so he was able to join this small fraternity on the other side. He actually ended up writing a brief for the Attorney General in the Austin case that you and I lost in the Supreme Court. And he also drafted an amicus brief in the Citizens United case that we won. So he changed sides, and another decision came down. But also better lawyers and better justices. But after 20 years, the First Amendment was upheld in that controversial case.
Well, like in politics, litigation, it's all in the timing.
Exactly right, exactly right.
Tell us a little bit about how you and your partners, Rex Schleybaugh and Bill Whitbeck, decided to seek a merger with the state's largest law firm, Dykem Gossett.
We didn't. It was McLellan, Schleybaugh, and Whitbeck. Rex Schleybaugh's mother, Doris, had been on the governor's staff, worked with the Dragon Lady, Joyce Braithwaite. And when he got out of law school, Doris said, well, Rex is looking for a job. So I hired him, and then we formed McLellan and Schleybaugh the day he passed the bar. Whitbeck then came back and had worked for the state for a couple of years from George Romney in Washington. He went into practice, and we hired, then it was McLellan, Schleybaugh, and Whitbeck. Then we hired Al Ernst from the Attorney General's office. And he was sort of an energy guy that Bill Whitbeck knew. And Frank Kelly told him not to go to work for these guys. They're all just Republicans. They're just riding on Milliken's coattails. Minute Milliken is out, they'll be gone. Well, he decided to come with us. He was just mad because we didn't put his name on the door and we wouldn't give him a speakerphone. Only the partners got speakerphones back there. So Al always wanted that speakerphone. He's turned out to be one of the most successful lawyers in the state in the whole area of telecommunications and energy. So we built up that firm, and then one day we got a call from Brian Sullivan.
At Dykem.
At Dykem, he was the chairman of Dykem. Well, we had been representing the mobile home industry, and one of the major mobile home companies in Michigan had a Dykem as their lawyer. And Rex got to know that lawyer pretty well. He then told Brian Sullivan, who was just the new chairman, that Brian wanted an office in Lansing, because Dickinson,
Miller
and
Canfield,
they all had an office in Lansing, and Dykem did not. So this partner told Brian, and Brian said, okay, I'll call these guys. So he called me up and got me on the phone, and he said, we'd like to talk to you about maybe, coming in with us. And would you like to come down to Detroit and we can talk about it? And I figured this was one of those times you either have to, do what they want or do it your way. And I said, well, Brian, we're really busy up here. Why don't we meet in Brighton, which was halfway. And a lot of times if you're going to go to Detroit, you'd meet in Brighton. And he agreed to do that. But he slammed the phone down. And he said, who do these people think they are? This little dinky firm in Lansing. They can't come down to see me. Well, I knew if we went down on his turf, he'd take us around on a tour and he'd, blow smoke at us. Whereas if we met him in Brighton, we could blow smoke at each other at least. And after couple months, we integrated our practice with Dykem. We didn't call it a merger, we didn't call it a buyout. But then thereafter, Dykema swooped in with all of their systems and their administrative people and their papers. And I remember the very first day, it was April 1st, was when we joined the firm.